Ever watch someone laugh at a man right before they realize they never understood him? This one's wild. Stick with it to the end and subscribe if you like stories like this. I was 34, sitting in that icebox of a courtroom, staring at the clock behind the judge's bench, while my ex-wife giggled with her lawyer like this was some casual brunch. Tamsin leaned in close to him, whispering and laughing like I wasn't even there. Curtis Vale, her attorney, looked more like a game show host than a litigator. Bright blue tie, smug face, perfectly gelled hair. He cracked another joke, and she smacked his arm playfully. I kept my eyes locked on the flag near the judge's bench. Alden Brooks, my lawyer, had warned me in the hallway. Keep your face calm, Merrick. Let them think they know the whole story. So I sat still, didn't blink, didn't twitch. Let them enjoy their little show. Meanwhile, the weight of my dad's old chef's knife sat heavy in my briefcase at my feet. It was the only thing I kept after we buried him. The handle was cracked and worn smooth from years in his hand. He used to call it his silent partner. Curtis stood like he was accepting an award. Your Honor, my client has been more than fair. She's ensuring Mr. Hale can transition into a modest but stable life. Like she was passing out scraps behind a mansion. Every word was a lie that painted me like some limp house cat she carried through life. 9 years of marriage rewritten as her solo journey with a tag-along. They had no clue. Then Alden stood, slow, controlled, no theatrics. We accept the proposed terms, Your Honor, but we also filed an updated financial disclosure this morning. Before we continue, drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see where everyone's listening from. Thanks for being here. He placed a thick spiral-bound binder on the table in front of us, nearly 4 inches thick. Another copy slid across the table toward Curtis. For a second, Curtis barely looked at it. He was too busy smirking. Then he opened it, page by page. Flip, flip. His forehead creased. Tamsin's smile faltered as she watched him read. And me? I stared at the edge of that binder and felt the first tremble of something real. My thoughts jumped backward, hard and fast, to where it all began. One cheap metal shelf in a half-basement rental that smelled like cardboard and mildew. That's where I set my dad's knife down, front and center. Called it a prop. Just a placeholder to make the display look fuller. I didn't know it would be the first step in building a life that would lead me right here, across from a woman who once swore she'd never lie to me. Judge Ashford entered, gavel tapping lightly. Everyone stood. I didn't look at Tamsin. I reached for the binder, flipped it open, and turned straight to the Hale Edge section. Quick note, before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. And let's continue. The courtroom faded, but the memory sharpened. I could still smell that mildewy half-basement we called our showroom. Tamsin strung up twinkle lights and stacked second-hand mugs like it was some high-end boutique, but we both knew it was a pit with barely any heat. Rent was $600 a month. No natural light, street entrance that felt like walking into a fallout shelter. Tamsin was electric back then, talked non-stop about redefining home and making luxury simple. Big hand gestures, glossy eyes, lots of dreams wrapped in cheap scarves and vintage blouses. She could sell a cracked teapot like it was the centerpiece of a lifestyle. Me? I sat at a folding table we found behind a grocery store, running numbers, drawing packaging ideas on printer paper we couldn't afford to waste. The big shift came when I realized we'd never survive selling random furniture, shipping costs, returns, broken items. It was a death spiral. I pitched the idea of a kitchen accessory subscription. Lightweight, low overhead, recurring revenue. Monthly surprises for home cooks, I said. Make the box feel like a gift people give themselves. She nodded like it was gospel, then practiced the pitch in the mirror that night, smoothing her hair, stealing my phrases. She started introducing the Emberline concept like it had all come to her in some middle-of-the-night lightning strike. I didn't push back, not then. At our first real investor meeting, she wore a navy blazer she found for $12 at a thrift store. Looked like $1 million in it. The pitch deck was mine, my diagrams, my notes, just cleaned up in Canva, but she walked through it like she'd invented fire. When one of the older investors asked about the subscription model, she tilted her head, gave that cute laugh she used to reserve just for me, and said, "Honestly, it just hit me one night. Inspiration's funny that way." The room chuckled. I clapped too, sitting in the back, smiling like I wasn't being erased right in front of everyone. Emberline took off after that. The boxes got sleeker, the showroom moved above ground, and Tamsin became a minor celebrity in the home goods world. Influencer brunches, lifestyle panels, podcasts where she talked about building from nothing with stubborn work and long nights. I was usually cropped out of the photos. At parties, she'd call me her steady support, toss me a beer, and say I kept the spreadsheets warm. Guests laughed, I smiled, and then I refilled the chip bowl or washed dishes in the background like an invisible intern. At night, when the house went quiet, I pulled out a $5 sketch pad and drew knife handles. My dad used to say a good handle should feel like part of your palm, not a tool. I remembered his knuckles, swollen and red from years on the line, and his one decent knife, the one in my briefcase now, resting on a chipped magnetic strip above our stove growing up. One night, Tamsin caught me sketching. She leaned over the couch, saw the pages, and gave this soft little smile like I was showing her a kid's crayon drawing. "Cute hobby, Merrick," she said, "but we need you focused on the real business." I didn't say anything. I just closed the sketch pad, stood up, and started clearing the wine glasses from the coffee table. The next week, I came back from a grocery run, bags digging into my fingers, keys clenched between my teeth. I was pushing the front door open with my knee when I heard her voice, Tamsin, sharp and cheerful, talking loud in her office down the hall. I moved slow, catching just enough words to realize she was on a call with Victor Langford. Big investor. Big ego. The kind of guy who wore suits to backyard barbecues. I stood still when I heard my name. Victor asked, "So what does Merrick actually do for Emberline these days?" And just like that, her tone shifted into this syrupy, sweet chuckle I'd heard 1,000 times. "Oh, Merrick? He's just around. Keeps the house running. Handles the small stuff so I can focus on the vision." My stomach dropped. The left bag slipped from my hand. Carton of eggs hit the floor and burst like little grenades, yolk spreading across the tile. I didn't say a word. I didn't barge in. I just stood there, breathing through my teeth, letting the pieces fall where they fell. She kept talking like I didn't exist. I cleaned up the mess, put the groceries away, wiped the counters, and moved through the rest of that evening like I wasn't even in the room. She didn't notice. She was too busy going over a new collab launch with someone on speakerphone, asking if the color story was cohesive. I wanted to throw something. Instead, I just kept chopping onions for a stir-fry she didn't even touch. That night, after she went to bed scrolling her feed, I grabbed my keys and left. I didn't even know where I was going. I ended up outside this old 24-hour diner we used to go to when we were broke and stupid. Closed now. Dead neon sign flickering above the door like it still had something to say. I sat in the dark with the engine off, phone in my hand. For a while I just stared at the screen. Then I scrolled until I found the number. Jessa Crow, friend from design school. The only person I'd ever shown my knife sketches to. The only one who remembered I used to want something more. She picked up on the third ring. "Merrick? Wow, it's been years." I didn't even say hello. I just told her what Tamsin said, that I was just around. My voice cracked, but not from sadness. Rage. Cold, quiet rage. Jessa didn't miss a beat. "Okay, so what are you going to do about it?" I let out this bitter laugh. "What can I do? She owns the business, the house, the spotlight." "No," she snapped. "You gave her all that. You built half that entire company. You designed her subscription model. You don't need to fight for scraps. Do something with those knives you always talked about, or stay a ghost. Your call." I didn't argue. I just sat there staring at the passenger seat, where my dad's old knife rested in its worn leather wrap, handle worn smooth, tip still sharp, the only thing in my life that hadn't let me down. Jess's voice came through again, calmer. "If you're serious, I've got people. Steel guys, small batch producers. I can hook you up with real suppliers, but I'm not offering twice." I looked down at my hands, still rough from warehouse shifts and years of being just around, and right there, sitting in that cold car, I made the call. I told her, "Send me their info. I'm ready." The next day, I paid cash for a month-to-month rental on a single-car garage behind an auto shop on the east side. Rusted roll-up door, cracked concrete, no heat. The place smelled like burnt oil and old tires, but it was mine. I told Tamsin I joined a boxing class nearby to blow off steam. She barely looked up from her tablet, just said, "Good, maybe you'll get your energy back." I dragged in a secondhand workbench I found on Craigslist, bolted a clamp light to the edge, and hung my dad's knife on a bent nail above the table. It was the first thing I did, like anchoring the room to something real. That knife had survived 3 kitchens, 1 fire, and more fights than I could count. Now it hung over me like a dare. Jessa came through fast. A week later, I got a heavy box full of steel bars, cheap tools, and handwritten notes in Sharpie. She called every few nights, walking me through terms, grit, tempering, bevels, stuff they don't teach in business school. Her voice was sharp, no fluff. I tore up my fingers on the first few attempts, messed up the heat treating, burned through a glove, came home with bandages and blamed it on warehouse shelving at Emberline. Tamsin didn't ask questions. She just asked if I'd be up for a product launch brunch that weekend, because I'd missed the last one. The first knives I made were ugly as anything, chunky, unbalanced, rough grinds that pulled sideways when you sliced. But holding them lit something up in me I hadn't felt since I was 20. My hands were wrecked, my back ached, but I didn't care. Every night I left that garage sore, sweaty, and grinning like a lunatic. Tamsin started noticing. "You're distant," she said. "Tired, checked out." One night after an Emberline shoot, she came home in full makeup and told me maybe the company had outgrown family help and needed more experienced leadership. I said nothing, just nodded like a man taking inventory. My cousin Jeremy worked the grill at a diner on 3rd and sometimes did night shifts at Emberline's warehouse. He was 22, broke, honest to a fault. After his late shifts, I'd meet him out back and hand him one of my latest blades. He'd cut through old crates, onions, tomatoes, whatever the diner was tossing. "This one slips too much, handles off center. But this one's clean. Feels like something real." That feedback meant more to me than anything Tamsin ever said. The more she traveled for brand collabs and influencer weekends, the more hours I poured into that garage. I started sketching full handle sets, researching steel composition, testing edge angles with cheap tomatoes from the corner store. The grindstone became my therapist. The noise, the sparks, it shut out the rest of the world. Jessa kept me grounded. She didn't coddle me. Half my sketches she trashed without hesitation. "Too clunky. Too flashy. Looks like a toy." Then she'd say, "If this is about your dad, make something he would have trusted, not something that just looks cool in an Instagram post." She was right, always was. I started over again. That night, I stayed in the garage past 2 a.m., grinding, shaping, sanding steel until the blade finally felt like something I wasn't embarrassed to hold. I turned off the lamp, rolled down the garage door, and slipped the finished knife into my coat pocket. The blade in my coat pocket that night was rough, but it was mine. I brought it home wrapped in an old shop towel, hid it in the back of the closet, and couldn't sleep for the next 2 nights. I was past the stage of hiding from myself. A week later, Jessa called me on speaker while stuck in traffic. "You can't keep playing basement bladesmith. Pick a name. Make it real." I thought about it while staring at the garage ceiling. Haledge, my last name, finally out in the open. My edge. I added Forge because that's what it felt like. Me trying to pound my way out of something with heat and pressure. We registered Haledge Forge through a low-profile site Jessa knew that didn't connect the dots to Emberline. I used a variation of my middle name and a burner email. It took 20 minutes, but my hands were sweating like I was robbing a bank. Building a website was worse. I spent 3 straight nights messing with themes, clicking buttons I didn't understand, trying to make the checkout page work. On the 4th night, I nearly threw my laptop through the garage wall and texted Jessa, "I give up." She replied with a name and number, some web design kid from Denver she swore by. I Venmo'd him half the rent money, and by the end of the week, I had a clean, no-frills storefront with 5 product slots and a logo made from one of my own sketches. The next leap was production. I wired almost every dollar I'd saved, plus a 5-figure line of credit I'd opened without telling Tamsin, to a small manufacturer in rural Indiana. They promised a run of 160 blades, full assembly included, shipping in 6 weeks. When the boxes came, I locked the garage door and opened the first one like it might explode. My heart dropped. Warped blades, crooked rivets, handles misaligned like a child glued them on during recess. About 1/3 of them were unsellable trash. I wanted to scream. Instead, I grabbed my grinder and started fixing what I could. It took me 4 straight weekends to salvage most of them. The worst ones I buried in a storage bin under a pile of tarp and shame. Tamsin asked where I kept disappearing to. I told her inventory at the warehouse needed sorting. She didn't question it. She barely listened. Then, one night, an order came through from Oregon. Someone I didn't know bought one of my knives. Full price. No promo code. Just chose it. I sat in the garage staring at the order confirmation for 10 minutes before I could even pack the box. A few weeks later, a food blogger from Minnesota posted a demo video, slicing onions like a machine. She held my blade up to the camera and said, "You can tell this was designed by someone who actually cooks." The site traffic spiked. Orders hit double digits in a day. I packed boxes until 4 a.m., taping shipping labels while my hands still smelled like metal dust and lemon oil. Tamsin started complaining about Emberline's supplier delays. "No one's prioritizing our kitchen line," she snapped one night. "I don't know what happened, but things keep falling through." What she didn't know? One of those suppliers had quietly moved Hale Edge up their queue. My orders were tiny but consistent. I paid fast. I treated them like partners, not peasants. For nearly 2 years, I lived 2 lives. Mild-mannered husband and warehouse grunt by day, knife maker and founder by night. My bones ached, my hands cracked. But every cut, every hour in that garage felt like another inch of rope pulling me out of the hole she left me in. That week, I pulled the last crooked knife from the first batch, ground it smooth, and etched 1 on the heel. Then I boxed it and shipped it to Jessa with a note. For the one who didn't laugh. A few days before what would have been our 9th wedding anniversary, I did something stupid. I stopped by Emberline's office with a box of pastries from that overpriced French place she used to love. It wasn't a peace offering, just muscle memory. I stepped out of the elevator, balancing the box, still warm, and saw her near the lobby couches. Her back was to me, but I knew that laugh, knew the way she tossed her hair when she was performing. Colin Dre stood too close beside her. Young, sharp suit, haircut that screamed podcast host. His hand hovered just behind her hip, like he was waiting for permission to make it obvious. She leaned into his shoulder like it was the most natural thing in the world. I stopped walking. Tamsin turned and saw me. Just a flicker of shock in her face. Then came the switch. Smile on, tone sweet, posture stiffening like I was a client she didn't want to spook. "Merrick," she said. "This is Colin, our marketing director. Colin, this is Merrick, an old friend I'm helping get back on his feet after a rough divorce." That one line did more damage than anything she'd ever screamed in a fight. She took my whole life and boiled it down to a pity project. Colin looked at me, offered a handshake I didn't take. He said, "Nice to meet you, man," like he wasn't sure what I was doing there. I didn't answer. I handed her the box, turned, and walked right back into the elevator without a word. The doors closed. I didn't hit a floor. I just stood there, staring at my own reflection in the chrome paneling, jaw locked tight. Down on the street, I slid into the back of a cab, pulled out my phone, and scrolled through old messages from Jessa. Found the number she'd sent months earlier. "Tell him everything," she'd texted. "He doesn't get rattled." His name was Alden Brooks. I called and left a voicemail. He called back within the hour and set a meeting for 2 days later. When I walked into his office, he didn't stand, just nodded toward a chair and clicked his pen. No small talk. I like that. I laid it out. Emberline, Hale Edge, the garage, the fake boxing classes, Tamsin's habit of rewriting the truth every time she opened her mouth. I told him about Colin, about the website she built with my pitch deck, and the knife brand she never once took seriously. Alden didn't flinch, just kept taking notes in tight, blocky handwriting. Finally, he said, "She's going to paint you as the dependent one. She'll say you have no income, no direction, and that Emberline was her solo venture. The best thing we can do is let her believe that a little longer. Meanwhile, we document everything. We play the long game." It wasn't a warm comfort. It was a war plan, and it was exactly what I needed. A week later, Jessa sent me a screenshot of an old Instagram post from one of Emberline's junior assistants, a photo from some team bonding trip in Palm Springs. Tamsin and Colin were already wrapped around each other in the background. Same fake smiles, same tight angles, like they'd been a team longer than anyone admitted. Through a warehouse guy who'd been fired last year, I found out they'd been traveling for brand work together more than once, sharing hotel rooms when nobody was supposed to know. The story was always the same, just business, just strategy, just content. I didn't say a word, didn't confront her. I filed it away, cold and clean. Evidence, not heartbreak. The night before our first court filing, I drove to the garage, pulled down the roll-up door, and started grinding a new blade. By the time we hit the 6-month mark before the hearing, my life was spreadsheets, binders, and legal printouts. Tamsin's lawyers filed version after version of the same narrative. Me as the clingy ex-husband with no real income, no identity, just resentment and wasted potential. A man orbiting a star. Alden told me to keep my cool. Don't argue with her in court filings. Don't tip your hand. Let her keep underestimating you. It works in our favor. So I nodded through every draft, every red pen comment. We gave them the bare minimum on Hale Edge, enough to satisfy disclosure laws, nothing extra. My hands wanted to toss pages across the room. Instead, I stayed up late building a paper trail so clean you could frame it. Supplier contracts, profit margins, taxes, traffic data from the food blogger Spike. Real, measurable work. Not just a hobby, a business, and I was the only name on it. Then a letter landed on Alden's desk with a big firm logo on top. Curtis's team again. Only this one didn't mention Emberline. It was a cease and desist attempt from a cutlery trademark applicant claiming overlap with a related culinary brand they were quietly trying to register. I read the name twice. It was a clunky, knockoff-sounding version of Hail Edge, something like Edgecraft Living, full of buzzwords, no soul. I handed the paper back, jaw tight. They're trying to steal it. Alden actually smiled, not a smirk, an honest, satisfied smile. It's good. This right here, this shows intent. Judges love intent. Looks desperate. Looks greedy. We added it to the evidence packet, along with screenshots, emails, receipts. Tamsin wanted to make it look like I was clinging to her success, but all she was doing was proving how threatened she felt by mine. And then, 2 weeks before our final filing deadline, I got an email from a major culinary holding company based in Switzerland. They'd seen the food bloggers post, they'd run the numbers, they were impressed with the growth curve and design philosophy. They weren't offering partnership, they were offering a full acquisition, $32 million. I stared at the screen like it had to be a phishing scam. I forwarded it to Alden without saying a word. He called within 5 minutes. "We could bury them," he said. "We accept the offer, go public, file a counterclaim for misappropriation and marital asset sabotage. We'd get damages, maybe even a ruling that puts half of Emberline on the line." I leaned back in my chair and looked up at my garage ceiling, that same water stain I'd stared at when I first chose the name Hail Edge. My dad's knife was still on the nail above the bench, blade dulled from years of thoughtless use, but still solid, still mine. "I don't want to be the guy who torched his ex-wife's company to prove a point," I said. "I want a clean record. I want the value on paper. Let them see it and feel it and know I did it without them." Alden exhaled hard, like he was letting go of some great courtroom brawl he'd been craving. "All right, we'll submit it. Full offer, full valuation. It'll speak for itself." I nodded. Then I shut my laptop, stood up from my desk, and walked to the garage door to start my next shift. Curtis was already flipping through the binder when I sat back down at the courtroom table, hands folded, back straight. At first he looked bored, like he was waiting out a formality. Then I saw it, the slow change in his face. Shoulders stiffening, brows drawing tight. The second his eyes landed on the Hail Edge valuation pages, he stopped flipping and slid the binder sideways toward Tamsin. He leaned in and whispered something sharp. She blinked, leaned over the stack, and started reading. I watched her face drain, piece by piece, as the numbers sank in. First the revenue charts, then the wholesale projections, then the acquisition offer, bolded and clean at the bottom of the page. $32 million. Her jaw tensed. For nearly 2 years she'd called Hail Edge my little garage distraction, a hobby, background noise. Now she was staring at a valuation that made Emberline look like a boutique Etsy store. Across from us, Judge Marlene Ashford glanced from Curtis to Tamsin to Alden, who hadn't said a word. Then she looked at me. I didn't move. I didn't smile. Just kept my hands flat on the table, steady. Judge Ashford closed the file in front of her and spoke in a calm, clipped voice. "I'm going to call for a recess so counsel can fully absorb this new information. We'll reconvene at 3:45. As the courtroom emptied, I stood and walked out like I had a schedule to keep. I headed straight for the water fountain down the hall, rolled my shoulders, and exhaled. I felt weirdly light, like I'd just set down a backpack I didn't realize had been welded to my spine. That's when I heard the heels behind me. Tamsin's voice was sharp. "How long were you planning to hide this fortune while I was out building Emberline?" I turned slowly, gave her nothing, just let her stand there with her perfect blowout and her panic peeking through the foundation. She stepped closer, voice pitched lower now. "You blindsided me. I wasn't against Hail Edge. I just thought you needed a push. You think I didn't believe in you? I always believed in you. We're supposed to be a team, Merrick. The queen and king of the kitchen world, we could own everything. That used to work on me. The charm, the pivot, the fast rewrite of the past. Not this time." I kept my voice calm. You believed in me the day you called me just around to Victor Langford. You believed in me when you told some marketing kid I was an old friend you were helping after a fake divorce. That's what I remember. Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. You needed me small, I said. It made you bigger. That worked for a while. It doesn't anymore. She stared at me, blinking fast like I was speaking another language. I stepped around her, walked back toward the courtroom. I didn't look back to see if she followed. The judge signed off a week later. Tamsin walked away with the bulk of Emberline, and I walked out with full control of Hale Edge. The court included the $32 million valuation in the official record. It didn't change what I built, but it shut down the lie that I was ever some sad sidekick clinging to her spotlight. A few months later, I was sitting in a glass-walled conference room in Paris, surrounded by executives from that same culinary holding company. Same suits, same stiff accents, but this time I wasn't here to sell. I'm not giving up control, I told them. You want logistics, distribution, licensing, we can talk. But Hale Edge stays mine. We went back and forth for hours. They pushed equity splits, I pushed brand rights. Finally, we landed on something we could both live with. They'd handle the back end, I'd run the brand, the design, and the production philosophy. Every blade would still pass through my hands at least once. On the table in front of me sat our flagship prototype, carbon steel, fine edge, walnut handle shaped off the one my dad used every night. We kept the taper, added balance. Clean, simple, built to last. When the deal was done, I signed my name clean across the page. My phone buzzed in my pocket the second the pen left the paper. Normally I ignored news alerts, especially anything with Emberline in the subject line, but the headline stopped me. Emberline knives, flop, customer returns skyrocket. I opened the article. They'd rushed out a cutlery line to compete with Hale Edge, but cut corners on materials and went with bargain suppliers. The blades bent. Handles cracked. Customers demanded refunds in droves. The quotes hit harder than I expected. One unnamed employee said, "We warned her, but she treated staff like we were disposable." I found out later it was my old warehouse manager. Another voice chimed in, Jeremy, my cousin. He'd worked late nights loading Emberline shipments. Now he was giving reporters the inside scoop on how badly she ran things. Even Victor Langford chimed in. He kept it clean, but the subtext wasn't subtle. We decided to withdraw funding after observing repeated leadership blind spots, particularly around partner treatment and product strategy. Jessa sent me the bankruptcy link 2 weeks later. Chapter 11, Filing, Frozen Inventory. The whole place shut down. Photos showed pallets of unused Emberline knives stacked in a shuttered warehouse, boxed up like artifacts no one wanted to claim. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like proof I'd been right to walk. That night, back in my Paris hotel, I didn't pop champagne or scroll the headlines. I pulled out a small travel skillet, went down to the corner market, and bought onions, eggs, and a hunk of cheese. I cooked a quiet meal by the window, using one of my own knives. Clean slices, no flecks, no wasted motion. And I heard my dad in the back of my head, shaking his head with a tired smirk. "Told you," he'd say. "Good tools outlast loud words." I was home, finally home. My small kitchen smelled like garlic and wet steel, and the overhead bulb hummed low. I stood at the counter, wiping down my dad's old knife with a soft cloth, the Hale Edge prototype next to it, sleek, balanced, sharp as a new blade. The knock came just as I turned to rinse the cloth. 3 short taps. I dried my hands, walked to the front door, and opened it without checking the window. Tamsin stood there. Not camera ready, not CEO polished, just tired. Hair pulled back, makeup streaked, eyes ringed with old mascara that clung like regret. Her coat looked expensive but wilted, like even the fabric was done trying. She tried to smile. "Everyone's gone," Victor pulled out. Colin ghosted. Most of the staff bailed when the checks started bouncing. I didn't say anything. I waited. "I kept thinking someone would stick around," she said. "But they only cared when I was on top. You were the only one who ever actually saw me." She shifted her weight, pulling her coat tighter. "We used to be unstoppable. You remember? That half-basement showroom? We had nothing but coffee and grit, and still made it feel like something." I felt the tug in my chest, yeah. I remembered the way she used to laugh over cardboard cuts and late nights, how we shared stale bagels and big dreams. For half a second, that memory almost made me step aside. But then I heard her voice again. "He's just around." Then her line in the lobby. "An old friend I'm helping after a rough divorce." She looked up at me, eyes wide. "Maybe we could start over, now that you're finally taking the lead. You wouldn't be here if I hadn't pushed you." That did it. I took a breath. My hands still smelled like onion and steel. I held both knives, my dad's and mine, and spoke slowly. I forgave you a while back, but not to get back together. I did it so I wouldn't drag you into what comes next. Her mouth opened, but I didn't let her speak. The man who stood behind you in every photo, he's gone. The one who let himself be erased, done. The life I'm building now doesn't have space for that version of us. She stared, waiting for the old me to show up, to flinch, back down, offer an inch. But that man didn't answer the door today. I said, I hope you figure your life out. I really do. But you're not coming through this door to do it. I stepped back, kept my voice even. Good night, Tamsin. Then I closed the door gently, locked it, and walked back to the kitchen. I hung my dad's knife back on the hook, picked up mine, and kept chopping. Quick question before you scroll. If you have hype, tap it. Please subscribe and like, and tell me in the comments when you finally stopped being someone's background.